Hey there, fellow trainers. Have you ever had an encounter and thought to yourself, should I catch or pass? Or perhaps you're merely wondering which encounters are the most desirable. Well, today, we're going to give you those answers as we review the various Pokemon that can be found on routes 29 and 30, the quaint Newbark Town, and the tranquil Cherrygrove City. As we awaken from sound slumber, we'll find ourselves in a sparsely decorated bedroom. A computer, radio, television, and bookshelf line the northern wall, and a map of the region is posted next to the stairwell. Making our way downstairs, we'll be stopped by our mother, who will give us our Pokegear, a tool that will prove essential on our journey, and send us on our way to meet Professor Elm. So, as we step outside into the open air, our gaze will be met by a quaint little seaside village. A few houses dot the landscape, with one large building towering over the rest. This is the Pokemon Lab, and the first major stop on our adventure. Let's head inside. As we step over the threshold, we'll be greeted by none other than Professor Elm. He'll have a small errand for us to run, and will grant us a Pokemon to accompany us on our journey. This choice is one that will have a substantial impact on our adventures in the Johto region, and so we must choose carefully. Of course, the three options he gives us to choose from are none other than Chikorita, Totodile, and Cyndaquil. Now, Chikorita is the grass-type starter of Generation 2, and has a design based on the sauropod family of dinosaurs. However, to truly know its worth, we must break down the various bits of data we have on this Pokemon and its evolutions. It should be noted, before we begin, that a key change occurred in Generation 2. This was the moment in the franchise that the special stat was finally split into the two composite stats we're familiar with in modern Pokemon, namely Special Attack and Special Defense. Now, Chikorita can sustain quite a bit of punishment, with a base HP stat of 45, a base defense of 65, and a base special defense of 65. It also boasts decent offensive stats, with a base attack of 49, a base special attack of 49, and a base speed of 45. This only improves upon its first evolution into Bayleaf, with notable improvements made to its already well-rounded base stats, and reaches its peak upon evolution to its final form, Meganium. It goes without saying that Meganium truly is one of the most balanced of the three starters in terms of its base stats. With a base HP stat of 80, a base defense of 100, and a base special defense of 100, it boasts exceptional durability. It is also no slouch when it comes to offensive stats, having a base attack of 82, a base special attack of 83, and a base speed of 80. It should be noted that there is a distinct lack of strong grass types in this generation, with Meganium being one of the few that are viable, whereas there are plenty of strong water and fire type Pokemon available. In my opinion, Meganium is one of the starters with the greatest long-term viability, but offers a slightly more challenging early game due to poor type matchups on the first few gyms. However, let's take a look at the other starters before making any rash judgments. Now, Totodile is the water-type starter of the Johto region, and one of the more popular choices amongst trainers just beginning their adventures. It boasts noteworthy physical and defensive bulk, with a base HP of 50, a base attack of 65, a base defense of 64, a base special defense of 48, and a base speed of 43. This only improves when it evolves into Croconaw, with an improved base HP of 65, a base attack of 80, a base defense of 80, a base special defense of 63, and a base speed of 58. Finally, It reaches its apex upon evolving to its final form, Feraligatr. Feraligatr boasts impressive defensive bulk, with a base HP of 85, a base defense of 100, and a base special defense of 83. It also boasts the same physical prowess of its earlier forms, only far improved, with a base attack of 105 and a base speed of 78. Now, there is one stat that you may have noticed I failed to mention across all three forms: their base special attack stat. This is often the sticking point of many a trainer's issues with this Pokemon. Sadly, the issue is only worse for its first and second forms of Totodile and Croconaw, which suffer from mediocre base special attack. Though, thankfully, it still has sufficient special attack as Feraligatr to make use of water-type moves for a stab bonus, but the majority of its power is from moves outside its typing. In my experience, you don't gain as much value from this Pokemon for being a water type as you would with other options. But let's move on to the one remaining starter we've yet to discuss, the Fire-type starter Pokemon Cyndaquil, as well as its evolved forms, Quilava and Typhlosion. Now, the one thing both Quilava and Cyndaquil have in common is their fragility. Cyndaquil is the most delicate of the two Pokemon, having a base HP of 39, a base defense of 43, and a base special defense of 50. This is slightly improved upon its evolution into Quilava, who has a base HP of 58, a base defense of 58, and a base special defense of 65. Both are still admittedly quite fragile, and can be easily taken out if put at a disadvantage. However, this issue is completely resolved upon evolution into its final form, Typhlosion. Typhlosion is, quite frankly, a powerhouse of a Pokemon. With a base HP stat of 78, a base defense of 78, and a base special defense of 85, it has significant defensive bulk. Its true strength, however, lies in its offensive stats, with a base attack of 84, a base special attack of 109, and a base speed of 100. Overall, this seems to be a clear winner out of the three starter options, but we should remember that things aren't always as clear-cut as they seem. Typhlosion's biggest flaw is in its available learn set. It's a special sweeper without access to much in the way of special moves or type coverage. The strongest moveset I can think of for this Pokemon is the moveset of Flamethrower, Thunder Punch, Fire Blast, and Sunny Day. Meanwhile, Meganium is a mixed sweeper, with access to powerful moves that cover both sides of the spectrum. The ideal moveset for Meganium, in my opinion, would be the moveset of Giga Drain, Earthquake, either Body Slam or Toxic, and for the final move slot, Synthesis. Now, before we move on, it's important to note that the Generation 2 games were the first to implement the passage of time into the franchise. As such, available encounters vary based on the time of day, with different Pokemon appearing during the morning, afternoon, and evening. So, with our chosen starter, we'll make our way back outside and head west onto Route 29 for our first batch of wild encounters. On this well-trodden route that connects Newbark Town to Cherrygrove City, we'll encounter the following Pokemon during the early hours of the morning and into the afternoon: Hoppip, Sentret, Pidgey, and Rattata. So let's start with Pidgey, one of the earliest flying type encounters you will meet on this journey. Looking at the base stats, we can see it's fairly balanced, but with a clear focus on being a speedy physical attacker. Pidgey has decent defensive bulk for the first stage of a 3-form evolutionary line, with a base HP stat of 40, a base defense of 40, and a base special defense of 35. It also has decent offensive stats, with a base attack of 45, a base special attack of 35, and a base speed of 56. Overall, for an early game encounter, this is not bad, and is definitely worth catching. However, the question remains, how far should we go with investing time training it? Well, to answer that question, we need to look at the learn set of this Pokemon. Right off the bat, we can see that from the early levels, it has access to the following moves via level up prior to its first evolution at level 18. Tackle, Sand Attack, Gust, and Quick Attack. Now Gust was formerly a normal type move in Generation 1, leaving Pidgey with no flying type stab moves until higher levels. This is rectified in Generation 2, with Gust being made a flying type move, granting earlier access to a stab bonus utilizing its secondary typing. Later in the mid to late game, it'll be replaced by either Fly or Wing Attack, depending on personal preference. However, moving on to Quick Attack, we have a solid stab move, with priority in the early game for Pidgey. This allows it to quickly get in damage to finish off weakened Pokemon. It retains usefulness in the late game due to being a priority move, but otherwise has little real purpose at that point. Sand Attack, on the other hand, is a status move that is more of a cheese strat and relies heavily on RNG to be useful. This is because all it accomplishes is applying debuffs to the opponent's accuracy, up to 6 stages, by 1 stage at a time while dealing no damage. Ultimately, in my opinion, it's a wasted move slot, but can be substituted for Mud Slap once you beat Faulkner if you opt to continue using Pidgey past that point. Ideally, you would replace it with Steel Wing if you use this Pokemon for the long term. Finally, we have Tackle, the starting normal type move of most early game Pokemon. It serves no real purpose outside of granting a stab move prior to learning Quick Attack and is frankly outclassed by it. Later on, you can replace Tackle with a move such as Return, Frustration, or Swift if you opt to use this Pokemon or its evolutions in the mid to late game. Overall, this leaves us with the ideal moveset of Return, Frustration, or Swift for the first move slot, Fly or Wing Attack for the second, Quick Attack for the third, and finally for the fourth and last move slot, we have Steel Wing. Personally, I would advise using this from the early game to the early mid game at most, as it begins to be outclassed by the alternatives available in the mid game before being hopelessly outclassed in the late game. Now let's move on to everyone's favorite little rodent. Not Rattata, but Sentret, and its evolved form, Furret. Starting with Sentret, we have a fairly unremarkable Pokemon, with a measly base HP stat of 35, a base defense of 34, and a base special defense of 45, it's fairly fragile. Offensively, it's not much better, having a low base attack stat of 46, a base special attack of 35, and an abysmal base speed of 20. Thankfully, this is greatly improved upon evolution into Furret at level 15. With a base HP stat of 85, a base defense of 64, and a base special defense of 55, it can certainly take a few hits and is far improved from its previous form. It also boasts improved offensive stats, with a base attack of 76, a base special attack of 45, and a noteworthy base speed of 90. With how quickly it evolves, this is a significant leap in its base stats, and makes it quite powerful in the early game, perhaps even more so than Rattata and Raticate. Speaking of Rattata and Raticate, however, they give Sentret and Furret decent competition, and are arguably the stronger Pokemon. Rattata has decent offensive stats for a physical attacker, with a base attack of 56, a base special attack of 25, and a base speed of 72. Raticate is only an improvement upon these stats, having a base attack of 81, a base special attack of 50, and a base speed of 97. Defensively is where these two arguably suffer in comparison to Sentret and Furret, with Rattata having a base HP of 30, a base defense of 35, and a base special defense of 35. It is slightly more fragile than Sentret. However, this is significantly improved upon evolution to Raticate, who has a base HP of 55, a base defense of 60, and a base special defense of 70, making them comparable to Furret in terms of defensive bulk. So if they're so similar, why would you argue that Rattata and Raticate are stronger, I hear you ask? Well, the answer to that lies in their learn sets. Despite the fact that Rattata evolves into Raticate at level 20, which is far later than when Sentret evolves into Furret at level 15, it does have one trump card in the form of Hyper Fang. With the stab bonus applied to Hyper Fang, it has a base attack power of 120, which in the early game is insanely powerful. This alone allows it to deal massive damage compared to other Pokemon available at this stage of the game, with only Ghost types being immune to its rampage. Overall, both are viable options in the early game, but they begin to lose viability in the mid-game as more powerful alternatives become available. Finally, we have my least favorite grass type in the game, Hoppip, and its evolved forms Skiploom and Jumpluff. Overall, they have two noteworthy base stats, their special defense and speed, with the rest of their base stats being fairly well-rounded. Hoppip has a base special defense and speed of 55 and 50 respectively, while Skiploom has a base special defense and speed of 65 and 80 respectively. Finally, Jumpluff has a base special defense of 95 and a base speed of 110. I can already hear you asking, so why do you dislike these three Pokemon so much? Well, to answer that, we should take a look at their type defenses and learn sets. Being both a grass type and a flying type, they have no real benefits from their dual typing, other than an immunity to ground type moves, which as a grass type, they'd already be resistant to. This is only worsened by the fact that it learns no flying type moves to take advantage of stab bonuses for its dual typing. So, to sum it up, the only thing it gains is immunity to ground type moves, something it would be resistant to already if it wasn't also flying type, at the cost of worsening its weaknesses to ice types. To me, this just seems like a terrible trade-off, all things considered, and is the core of my gripes with this Pokemon. Now, before we move on to Cherrygrove City, it should be noted that these are not the only Pokemon you can encounter here. If you happen to come here during the evening, you can encounter wild Hoothoots and Rattatas while walking in the tall grass. Hoothoot and its evolved form Noctowl are both clearly defensive Pokemon, geared towards walling out special attackers. Having significantly higher base special defense and HP than any other stat, with Hoothoot having a base HP of 60, a base defense of 30, and a base special defense of 56. Noctowl is only an improvement upon this with a base HP of 100, a base defense of 50, and a base special defense of 96. There is always a place for defensive Pokemon on a team, but I would say you're better off with a Pokemon like Pidgey as opposed to Hoothoot or Noctowl at this stage of the game, where defensive Pokemon are rather useless. The only real use they have is if you're using healing items, but even then, it's a niche usage. So I'd have to suggest you pass on this one. Making our way further west, we'll come across another seaside locale. This is Cherrygrove City, which, while certainly a larger and more robust village than New Barktown, is still not quite what I'd call a city. As we enter the city, we'll be greeted by a kindly old man who will give us a quick tour of the important buildings before giving us a map of the region in the form of a chip, which we'll install into our Pokegear. As we lack the tools to catch any wild Pokemon here from the nearby body of water, we'll quickly depart and make our way north onto Route 30. Now, Route 30 is a long stretch of rolling hills, grassy fields, and dense foliage that connects to Cherrygrove City in the south and Route 31 in the north. However, if we take the time to wander into the tall grass during the early hours of the morning, we can find the following Pokemon: Caterpie, Ledyba, Weedle, and Hoppip. If we decide to wait until the afternoon, we can instead find Caterpie, Weedle, Pidgey, and Marill roaming around the grassy fields and rolling hills. But if we wait even longer still, during the evening, we'll instead have a chance to stumble upon wild Spinaraks, Hootoots, Zubats, and Poliwags in copious quantities. Overall, out of all of these Pokemon, we have 7 new encounters, namely Caterpie, Weedle, Ledyba, Marill, Spinarak, Zubat, and Poliwag. Starting with Caterpie and its evolved form Metapod, we have a fairly lackluster entry to the roster. Overall, Caterpie is extremely fragile, having a base HP of 45, a base defense of 35, and a base special defense of 20. Offensively, it doesn't fare much better, with a measly base attack stat of 30, a base special attack of 20, and a base speed of 45. Metapod, on the other hand, has increased defensive bulk, with a base HP stat of 50, a base defense of 55, and a base special defense of 25. However, this increased survivability comes at the expense of its offensive capabilities, with Metapod having an even lower base attack of 20, a base special attack of 25, and a base speed of 30. So why bother with this Pokemon? Well, the answer comes with its final form, Butterfree. Butterfree is a powerful addition to the roster in the early game that loses its edge in the late game as it begins to be outclassed in the mid-game. After evolving from Metapod at level 10, it gains significant boosts to its offensive stats with a base attack of 45, a base special attack of 90, and a base speed of 70. It also retains significant defensive bulk, with a base HP of 60, a base defense of 50, and a base special defense of 80. Its true strength, however, lies in its learn set. By gaining access to the Psychic-type move Confusion at level 10, and all 3 Powder moves by level 15, it establishes a dominating presence in the early game. Having the ability to inflict a variety of debilitating status conditions and a move that takes advantage of its high base special attack is a quality that should not be overlooked. However, Butterfree is not the only early game bug type to dominate the scene. On the flip side, we have the poisonous Weedle and its evolved form, Kakuna. Similarly, much like the situation with Caterpie and Metapod, Weedle has stronger base offensive stats and weaker defensive ones, with a base HP of 40, a base attack of 35, a base defense of 30, a base special attack and defense of 20, and a base speed of 50. Meanwhile, Kakuna has weak base offensive stats and stronger defensive stats, having a base HP of 45, a base attack of 25, a base defense of 50, a base special attack and defense of 25, and a base speed of 35. And just like with Butterfree, the final form, Beedrill, is a noteworthy addition in the early game, though to a lesser degree. Beedrill has strong defensive bulk, with a base HP of 65, a base defense of 40, and a base special defense of 80. Meanwhile, it boasts powerful offensive stats, with a base attack of 90, a base special attack of 45, and a base speed of 75. For the early game, these are powerful base stats, but unfortunately, its learn set doesn't fully capitalize on this. With Twin Needle being the strongest bug-type move it can learn in the early game, and Poison Sting being the strongest poison-type move it has access to, it sadly can't make the most of its high base attack stat. It can definitely come in handy, but will fall off much sooner than Butterfree in terms of viability. Overall, I'd suggest you pass on Weedle, and maybe catch Caterpie. Assuming you're willing to invest in it all the way up to Butterfree, it can pay off in the early game and be a powerful addition to your team, whereas Beedrill just isn't worth it. Speaking of disappointing bug types, let's move on to Ledyba and Spinarak. Looking at the base stats of Ledyba, we can already tell that this is a defensive Pokemon, with significantly higher defensive stats than offensive ones. Having strong defensive bulk with a base HP of 40, a base defense of 30, and a base special defense of 80, it's clearly geared towards walling special attackers. Meanwhile, it suffers offensively, having a pathetic base attack of 20, a base special attack of 40, and a base speed of 55. This doesn't improve much when it evolves into Ledian at level 18. Ledian retains the impressive defensive bulk of Ledyba, having an improved base HP of 55, a base defense of 50, and a base special defense of 110. So what use does this Pokemon really have? Well, the only use it has is extremely niche, and relies on setup strategies utilizing Baton Pass. Even then, it only really can be used to boost the speed of slower Pokemon in this manner, via a combination of agility and Baton Pass, so its usage is fairly limited. Now, Spinarak is clearly more offensively oriented compared to Ledyba, but it's not without its share of problems. Spinarak has decent offensive stats with a base attack of 60, a base special attack of 40, and it can also tank a few hits, as it has decent defensive bulk with a base HP, defense, and special defense of 40. This is only improved upon evolution into Ariados at level 22, upon which it receives a notable boost to its stats. Its base HP, defense, and special defense jump to a value of 70 from its prior value of 40. Meanwhile, its offensive stats see similar changes, with an improved base attack of 90 and a base special attack of 60 compared to the previous values of 60 and 40. The main crux of the issue with this Pokemon, however, is its base speed. Spinarak has an abysmal base speed of 30, and Ariados barely improves upon this with a base speed of 40. Frankly, both are slow as molasses, and I personally would recommend you pass on catching these, as there are far better options available. Moving on to the Pokemon once dubbed by the community as Peekaboo, namely Marill, we have an unfortunate set of circumstances once again. Looking at Marill's base stats, we can see that this Pokemon is clearly a defensive water type. With impressive bulk, having a base HP of 70 and a base defense and special defense of 50, it can tank quite a few hits without any trouble. This trait is retained and only improved upon when it evolves into Azumarill at level 18. Now, Azumarill is, quite frankly, tanky as all hell, with a base HP of 100 and a base defense and special defense of 80, it can sit there and take a beating without breaking a sweat. Sadly, without abilities, a feature introduced with Generation 3, neither Marill nor Azumarill can truly deal any meaningful damage, rendering them largely useless as anything but a meat shield. Up next, we have Poliwag, a Pokemon that is certainly a long-term investment, but one that is definitely worthwhile. Normally, based on my previous analysis of this Pokemon in the Kanto region, I would advise you to invest in this Pokemon and evolve it into Poliwrath once it gains access to Hydro Pump. However, in Generation 2, with the addition of held items, we gain access to a secondary evolution path for Poliwhirl. If traded while holding a King's Rock, Poliwhirl evolves into Politoed. Now, Politoed is a beast of a Pokemon. It has significant defensive bulk, with a base HP of 90, a base defense of 75, and a base special defense of 100. but it also boasts impressive offensive capabilities with a base attack of 75, a base special attack of 90, and a base speed of 70. Overall, I'd say it has the advantage over Poliwrath on base stats alone, but it also has fewer weaknesses. Being purely a water-type Pokemon, it only has a weakness to electric and grass-type moves. However, it gets even better, as Politoed can use this to its advantage as it has a very similar learn set to Poliwrath, with the exception of having less access to fighting-type moves. It can effectively cover its own weaknesses within its own learn set without any gaps left open. Overall, if you were to use this Pokemon, I'd recommend the moveset of Hydro Pump, Surf, or Waterfall for the first move slot, followed by Ice Punch, Earthquake, and finally, Hypnosis. This moveset will grant you sufficient coverage for your weaknesses, while still outputting significant damage and debilitating status effects. Last but not least, we have everyone's least favorite pest, but a personal favorite of mine, Zubat. In the past, I said this Pokemon and its evolved form, Golbat, were hot garbage, not worth investing in. However, with the second generation of games came a new mechanic in the form of friendship. Having sufficiently high friendship with a Golbat would trigger an evolution upon level up into a new form, namely Crobat. Now, Crobat is truly a speed demon with a knack for both physical and special attacks, having a base HP of 85, a base defense of 80, and a base special defense of 80 meant it could take a lot of hits and get right back up. However, Crobat's true strength lies in its offensive stats, with a base attack of 90, a base special attack of 70, and a nightmarish base speed of 130, allowing it to outrun almost any Pokemon. With all of this in mind, let's take a look at its learn set and type matchups. Looking at its available repertoire, it would appear that it can cover most of its weaknesses with the exception of electric types. Using Bite, it counters psychic types and has the potential to cause them to flinch, thus losing a turn. Meanwhile, using the move Steel Wing counters rock types and ice types, while also having a chance to increase Crobat's defense. And finally, using Wing Attack or Fly grants Crobat a powerful stab move to deal super effective or neutral damage to anything else. Overall, it's a powerful addition to your roster if you choose to invest. Personally, I'd opt for the moveset of Fly, Bite, Steel Wing, and either Confuse Ray or Toxic for the final move slot. Now, if you have any strategies, tips, or ideas relating to any of the encounters thus far that I didn't mention, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Your input is always welcome here. And with that, we're all out of time for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more exciting content. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.